We were not ready for their divine judgment. We were tested, and almost everyone just failed. Now our world is an ever-twisting nightmare. Hellish threats lurk in every whisper and shadow. There is no glory, only survival. Deliver us from this trial. Reclaim our world for mankind.
I don't often play games at launch, and few new titles have captured my attention recently. It usually takes me some time to pick up a new game for various reasons. However, I've been curious about Zephon since its announcement. Proxy Studios' Gladius was a great game, especially for a 40k enthusiast like me, but it understandably lacked some of the depth typically found in 4X games, most notably in diplomacy. The grim and dark setting of 40k doesn't lend itself too much to negotiations, which justifies the absence of diplomatic elements in Gladius. Nevertheless, Proxy Studios had the opportunity to learn from their experience with Gladius, and I think their decision to expand upon the foundation with Zephon was a smart move. While Gladius thrived on its 40k lore and combat, a 4X game that eliminates diplomacy, limits exploration, and emphasizes extermination needs to ensure that its combat feels deeply rewarding. For me, Gladius, while enjoyable, had limited replayability due to its narrow focus on combat. While 40k isn't a shallow universe, Gladius certainly felt constrained. It was all about relentless warfare on a single planet. In contrast to that, Zephon offers a fresh direction. It immerses players in a post-apocalyptic Earth scenario that isn't fully explained, which I think works in its favor. The initial atmosphere reminds me of Earth 2040. Desolate landscapes, war machines locked in eternal conflict, and humanity's desperate struggle for survival. You know, the good stuff. So, what actually happened to Earth? Honestly, I don't know for sure, but here's what we can piece together. The Akrin, this alien race featured in Zephon, stumbled upon our planet and decided we pretty much suck. Although from the diplomatic messages you receive in-game, you can kind of piece together that they were on some sort of crusade against the great threat that was identified on this planet. Or at least I think so. So these aliens have their own thing going on, something called the Voice, which seems to be some dark, mystic ability of theirs. I wouldn't really call it magic, but whatever. Anyway, as the intro explains, their dark mysticism shattered an aura of enlightenment, leading to the destruction of most humanity, or that's at least the explanation the game gives you. But here's the neat stuff. Humanity created an AI named Zephon that kept the fight alive and basically won. Fast forward through an endless war and you'll find this AI is still active, pursuing its own agenda to rid the Earth of the Akrin, or their remnants. So when you start a game of Zephon, you don't actually choose a faction. There are no factions. You're always playing as the humans who survived the apocalypse. However, these humans have different leaders, and that's where the choice comes in. Some leaders are all about what's called human tech, basically what you would expect. Human soldiers, tanks, planes, barracks, yes sir, but with a sci-fi twist. Then you got a second group of leaders with a cyber affinity. These humans are on the path of augmenting themselves with technology to survive, featuring lasers, robots, and Terminator-like warriors. Finally, there are humans with an affinity for the Voice, those who dabble in dark mysticism and religion with unexplained phenomena that would give Fox Mulder a hard-on. I kinda dig it. So, since you're playing a 4X game, you set up your scenario and it's always played on a randomly generated map that resembles Earth, but not really. It's more like a twisted version of Gladius. The Gladius style of constant fighting against neutrals before facing real enemies is still in play. There are lore snippets that help fill in the gaps left by the lack of a solid backstory. You can usually read these in the description of the units you will be facing. But the main enemies that you will be facing are other human leaders, and you can customize who you'll be up against. But here's the interesting twist. In every game of Zephon, there are 3 established NPC factions already on the map. These are the Acrin Remnants, basically the leftover alien invaders, Zephon, the Skynet-like AI that kicked their asses, and a band of raiders led by Furiosa. So the basic scenario is that Zephon and Acrin are still at it, while the raiders are off doing their own thing, killing and looting everyone in sight. Meanwhile, you and the other human leaders are caught in the middle. In contrast to Gladius, diplomacy becomes essential. Pissing off an AI that just fought off an alien invasion, or antagonizing some aliens who traveled thousands of light years just to kick your ass isn't exactly a smart move. At least not right off the gate. And this is basically what I was talking about. You're not playing as Zephon or the Acrin. Instead, you take on the role of human leaders, each with unique affinities, special bonuses, and modifiers that shape how you tackle the challenge of human survival. One common complaint that I've seen brought up all the time is that all leaders basically share the same units. However, this is totally in line with the lore and is what Zephon wants to do. This design basically aligns with the story, as all leaders and their followers are human. The focus is on selecting a path forward, and that's where you come in. For example, leaders with cyber affinity have access to exclusive technologies and easier access to cyber achievements, while voice and human leaders enjoy similar benefits within their own specialties. It's all about how you mix and match these options. Personally, I find this approach very appealing, and I'm hopeful for more leaders in the future, especially considering the number of DLCs Gladius has released so far. I've also noticed that the AI tends to reflect their affinities, primarily using units from their own tech trees. But also, for those who prefer a more traditional experience, there is a modifier called Who Are You that you can unlock after completing a game. This allows you to restrict players to their affinities, which might seem counterintuitive to the overall concept, but it's available if you want it. Also, the classic Gladius way of customizing your game is back. I don't think there's anything that you can't really tweak to the smallest of details, so I guess tailoring your game to your liking wouldn't be an issue here. I always liked the way Gladius gave you that much choice, and Proxy Studios are kinda continuing the same way here with Zephon. Also, with workshop support, you're sure to soon have even more options to tailor the game to your liking. If there is a minor complaint I have here, it's the map sizes. I feel like the biggest map size is not really big enough. The game pace is basically unchanged. There are still lots of neutral enemies roaming the map, which gives you a more dynamic, war-focused 4X experience than in most other 4X games. Upon meeting enemies and NPC factions, you're now able to engage in diplomacy. My biggest gripe with the game would be just that. It seems too easy to pay anybody to be your friend. I had games where I turned a furious and angry enemy into a friend through one payment. While I'm not a fan of grudges that last forever and that are unchanging, I still would like more nuances here. In any case, the possibilities of working with factions are simple, yet seem like enough. Map exchanges, trading agreements, alliances, even asking for support, or basically buying units from factions for influence. The system seems like a stable framework that might need some more refinement later. There is also a global trade market called the Concordat, on which you can trade for resources and items. You mostly use influence for all of these transactions, which is one in-game resource that you gather. The main resources you gather are gathered through your cities and outposts. Outposts are basically locations you can capture on the map that give you certain benefits. The resources are pretty standard. You have food, minerals, energy, influence, and you have some fancy stuff like chipsets and other special resources that are created or bought and are usually needed for more advanced units. While the game does look like Gladius on the first look, the graphical effects have been improved a lot. One thing I like immensely, which is very apparent with Zephon, is that actual upgrades you research in the tech tree are visible on the units themselves. Additional armor, poisoned spears, additional weapons on your tanks, everything is visible on the actual models. A small thing in itself, it's a very immersing and rewarding thing, reminding me of the time you could actually see armor changes on your units in Total War games. I haven't really dived too much into the last Gladius DLC, mostly because they feature 40k factions which I'm not really that into, but there seems to be a significant step up with model animations as well with Zephon. There are some real highlights, some of the voice units look really eldritch, mystical and, well, alien. I want to avoid saying Lovecraftian. In any case, there are some other highlights like the Cyber Assassin hero, which really gives off a Terminator vibe, but generally the units are well modeled and animated, and they, along with the weapon and lightning effects, seem to be generally higher quality than in Gladius, but they share their same basic framework. I gotta say, I really appreciate the event arts, the digital art. The game is permeated by atmospheric pieces that spice up diplomacy screens, events, quests, and other in-game sequences. The sound design has also been improved. There are some repetitive unit barks, but the barks, the faction diplomacy, the minimalistic soundtrack, they are all not the best thing you ever heard, but everything works for the setting and fosters an additional sense of immersion. However, due to them making their own setting now, and not basically a licensed 40k game, the writing was also focused on the new lore. The snippets of lore that you find in quests, unit descriptions, events and other things are very interesting. There seems to be a certain joy to the sense of uncovering a post-apocalyptic mystery. Due to my game reviewing history, I always pay attention to the little things, because the passion of the devs can usually shine through in minuscule details that enhance the whole vision. Here's a good example. Depending on the leader type you're playing, your diplomacy messages and responses will differ. There are no fundamental differences. You will, for example, always ask for a trade deal, but the way you do it depends on who is talking and who you're talking to. If you're a voice leader and you're talking to Akrin, you have a much more mystical dialogue than if you're a normal human leader or a human leader with cyber affinity. The emulated mind leader, which is basically an offshoot AI, will mostly communicate in way an erratic, bugged software would communicate. Since this is a new release, the technical state of the game is also an important question. I haven't had any bugs or crashes. The loading times seem to be a little on the long side when you first launch the game, but honestly, I don't have it on my SSD either, so it's probably a big influence. I would say it's a pretty stable release. Since the game basically only released, I was not really able to try out all the things Zephon has to offer. When I say that, I'm mostly referring to the leaders. For now, let's give some examples and some cool combos you can have with the existing leaders. The Fallen Soldier seems to be the most basic leader, mostly having affinities to human technologies, which basically means dudes with guns, dudes in tanks, dudes in artillery pieces. But with one cool twist, since your units usually have to stop and dedicate turns to heal, if you're not healing them with other units or if they're not standing on outposts that automatically heal your units, you're basically always bound to have downtime in fighting. However, the Fallen Soldier has a unique ability, among other things, to have an innate regeneration on his biological units. That means even when you're in the middle of a fight and not dedicating turns to healing, your units will regenerate. That seems pretty strong, and I think the Fallen Soldier is one of the strongest leaders right now. The Fallen Soldier can also spend influence to buff up his units with experience. So basically, your units don't have to wait to level up through fighting, but you can actually spend influence to level them up. In any case, the lore twist here is that the Fallen Soldier has died once already. He was executed for cowardice in the face of the enemy, made an example of. But now he's back, unaware how or why, and with an unnatural ability for regeneration that carries over to his men. Another cool leader seems to be the Untold Prophet, a voice affinity leader which is basically a child prophet. Your goal here is to build a mass cult of followers, savage raider, criminal, dude with not so high moral values. Everyone can be forgiven by the prophet. That translates into spending influence on enemy units to convert them to your cause. A neat trick I found was converting neutral raider units, I think they're called Reavers, which have the ability to create new cities, so you basically get a free engineer unit before getting the engineer tech at all. I haven't really gotten around to really finding some neat trick with a cyber affinity leader. For now, the emulated mind, some kind of AI-human hybrid, seems to be the coolest one. You can only have one city with this leader, and you need to cope with that. It also seems that you can spend influence here to gain research, but I haven't really fiddled around with it too much. And I think the lore behind that was that the emulated wine was a woman that was suffering from cancer and then was kind of turned into an AI hybrid. I haven't really checked it too much, but there's some cool lore there. In any case, there are several more leaders. I find all of them appealing and interesting lore-wise, with the weakest link probably being the Honorable Aristocrat, which seems to be some sort of Harkonnen-like capitalist caricature. In any case, I just find him pretty bland and uninteresting. The leader system here is actually giving me some Endless Legend vibes. While Endless Legend of course has factions that play vastly differently compared to each other, I still think the same principle is kinda going on here, where Proxy Studios is trying to really differentiate between the leaders, even though they share a tech tree. In any case, I've been pretty interested in Zephon since the beta, and I can safely say that the game is worth your time and hard-earned credits. The thing I'm hoping for is a lively workshop scene and DLCs focusing on more leaders and different playstyles. But judging from the fact of what scope of support Gladius got, I'm pretty sure they won't drop Zephon anytime soon. If there was nothing else in this game, the lore alone would keep me interested to see where it's all going and what they can do with it. And to be honest, Zephon feels like a breath of fresh air today. Especially with no politics, no bullshit, just plain good old post-apocalyptic fantasy with a darker undertone. Right up my alley. So in any case, I'll see you guys next time. If we don't end up in an AI world apocalypse in the meantime, we should be seeing each other in the zone.